This is Dr. Jennifer Bashaw, and this is Christianity 125. We're starting our last unit now on Christian theology, and today we're going to talk about Christian practice and belief. And we're going to take a bird's eye view of Christianity. There are very many different denominations involved in Christianity with different practices and beliefs, but we're going to look at kind of what the different denominations have in common in their practice and belief, and maybe take a look at some of the differences as well. You should have already read the chapter here on Christian belief and practice, and let me just go through some of these essential elements of worship that our textbook author talks about. These are elements that are common to most Christian churches, and they're going to look different in different churches. But on the whole, all of these are present in Christian churches. Music, of course, music is an important part of many different church services. You'll hear all different kinds of music in different worship services. So, think about right now, what are some of the different types of music that you have encountered? Maybe hymns or choral music. Maybe upbeat sort of contemporary rock music. Maybe you've heard chants. If you've been to some more high church, traditional churches, there's many different types of music. I think about the Church of Christ, who they have a cappella music. There are not instruments that are used in their worship. So a wide variety of different music types. I want to play a brief video now just to give you a glimpse into a church and how they think about their worship. These are two men that lead different types of worship in the same church. So let's go ahead and take a look at this video.
I think that our job is to bring people into the presence of God.
Yeah.
To make them truly feel that with what we do. So many of our ministries are very, very important. Our missions, our education, but worship is what God calls us to do, and I think that that's why it's so incredibly important.
If God is sovereign before all things, above all things, in all things, and it's what we're called to do, that's what we do, man.
Absolutely. It's what brings us together as a larger body. In one mind. I think that's pretty incredible.
If we are coming down from deep and this is our belief and we are just giving it all to the Lord, it looks different to all of us.
Exactly.
Whether it's because we can sing or can't sing or can play an instrument or can't play an instrument in whatever style that is, whether it's a fast song or a slow song, whether we're dancing or laying down, it's all worship,
There are so many different styles of worship. There's the more modern worship, there's traditional like what we do, but then there are things that even go beyond that. There are subcategories in both of those.
Oh yeah?
As many people as there could be that many ways of worshiping. And it's trying to make worship happen for people with many different modes of coming into the presence of God.
There can be this kind of battle of the worship styles forever, which takes total focus off what it is. If we're worshiping for emotional fulfillment, man, that's totally wrong. We're not here to get ego boosts on us. We're here to worship the Lord. Now, in the end, do we feel that way? Yes. That's this byproduct of worshiping the Lord. We're centering around the Lord of Lords, King of Kings. And when we sing, we feel that way.
Really, the big difference is the music. And there's a little bit more of a casual nature, I guess, in the net, as opposed to what we do in here. But the worship is the same. You all are praising, you all are hearing the proclaimed word and responding to it.
Yeah.
Just as we are in this space.
If we had a service that was in Spanish, or in German, or in French, everything, the liturgy, the talking, everything, I wouldn't understand it the same way, or it wouldn't move me. I might pick up on some of the words or whatever. Would I love the fact that the nature, the reason that we're doing it is there? Man, yes. It's doing the exact same thing that I'm doing. It's just doing it in a different language.
If people are worshiping for the right reasons, no matter how they're worshiping, I think that God is pleased, because God tells us that we're to be about that. No matter what the style is, the most important thing is that we do it the absolute best we can.
Oh, yeah.
Because it is so important what we're doing.
Man, like, we all are here worshiping God. That's awesome.
So as you can see, there are different types of music and worship, but if it is all pointed towards worshiping God, then it doesn't matter what style you're doing. You are doing something that is an element of church life. Of course, prayer is another essential element of worship, and there are different kinds of prayers. There's corporate prayers where the whole congregation says prayers together. There are individual prayers. Some people pray out loud in services. Some people are silent, but prayer does play an important part in worship, Christian worship. There's usually scripture reading, reading from maybe the Old Testament and the New Testament, depending on what church you go to. Most church services also have some sort of message. We'll call it a sermon or a homily, which is a shorter sermon. These are usually centered around some sort of scripture reading as well. It is a way to encourage the congregation, maybe teach people in the church to read and understand scripture. Another element is the collection of tithes and offerings. Typically, a tithe means a tenth of someone's income. And so many churches encourage members to give a tenth of their income to the church, but offerings is another word that's used sort of for anything that's given, maybe that's above and beyond the 10% or just the $5 that you drop in the offering plate as it comes along. Liturgy is a word that you may not be familiar with if you're in particular traditions of the church, but liturgy is a way to have a consistent practice every Sunday. These are maybe creeds that people say, or particular prayers, or particular readings, or particular songs that are sung on a regular basis, maybe every Sunday or every month. So the Lord's Prayer is an example of this. Liturgy can also be a practice that has been woven into the service, like passing the peace. If you've ever been, maybe at a Lutheran or Episcopalian or Methodist church, you say to one another, peace of Christ be with you and also with you. That is a tradition, a liturgy. And then holy days that come up throughout the year is also a liturgy. You may be able to name others if you grew up in a church tradition, things that happen every Sunday that in the same way, with the same words or the same actions. That's liturgy. Communion is also an important element. In fact, it is a sacrament in the Catholic Church, or an ordinance in the Protestant churches. The difference between those two is an ordinance is something that Christians believe that Jesus ordained for us to do. It's a practice we should follow. But sacraments are elements that people must perform in their salvation journey. So that's the difference between ordinance and sacraments, but all Christian churches have some sort of Lord's Supper or communion or Eucharist that they take part in. Sometimes every Sunday, maybe it might be one Sunday a month or one Sunday a quarter, but it's a time that Christians eat bread and drink grape juice or wine in order to commemorate the last meal that Jesus had with his disciples, and to remember Jesus' sacrifice and how that brings us together as a faith community. Baptism is the last essential element of worship, and there are many different kinds of baptism. In the Catholic Church, again, this is a sacrament. This is something that people must participate in when they are going through their journey of salvation. In the Protestant Church, it is an ordinance, which is something that we tend to do, but it's not necessary for salvation. Some churches will baptize infants, and this is a tradition that has come across throughout church history. And the idea here is that human beings are born into sin, and so baptizing a baby sort of cleanses the baby, sets them on the path to salvation. But there are other denominations like Baptist that believe in believer's baptism and practice believer's baptism. This is baptism of people who have already made a commitment to follow Jesus. So usually it's an older child or an adult that participates in this believer's baptism. But this is a very physical symbol of people following Jesus with their whole lives. So you will see baptism services throughout the year in churches. So all of these different essential elements may look different or the same in various churches, but they all share in common that these are elements that you will find in their worship services. When we talked about liturgy, we talked about holy days, and there are also sort of holy seasons in the Christian calendar, and some churches follow these very strictly, and some churches maybe do not, but there are some seasons that are important to the life of the church. Advent would be one of these seasons, and this is the period of time, the weeks leading up to Christmas. It is a time for people in the church to prepare their hearts to celebrate the coming of Christ. And usually they have particular songs. Churches have particular songs they sing and scripture passages that they read. So Advent is a preparation for the advent or coming of Jesus. And of course, Christmas Day is when Christians celebrate the birth of Jesus. Jesus' birth probably did not happen on Christmas Day, but in church history they decided to pick a day for us to celebrate that, and now it is December 25th. Epiphany is the next season right after Christmas that not all churches celebrate, but it is something that recognizes and celebrates the Magi, the wise men that came from the east that we read about in Matthew. And the wise men come and bring gifts to Jesus. And so there are some churches that celebrate this, and they may give gifts. If you've heard of the 12 days of Christmas, that's the 12 days after Christmas where gifts are exchanged. So this is part of the Epiphany celebration. Then we go about a month or two before we come to the next major celebration day in the Christian calendar, and that's Ash Wednesday. This is a time that is leading the church into the period of Lent. So Ash Wednesday is a day in which people will come to church often and to remember the suffering of Jesus, to enter into a time period of remembering Jesus' suffering and to acknowledge our finiteness, maybe acknowledge our sinfulness. And we have a brief video. Actually, we might have to wait till the next video for the Ash Wednesday video. But Ash Wednesday also comes right after Mardi Gras or Fat Tuesday, which you might be familiar with. Many people throughout church history have celebrated Fat Tuesday or Mardi Gras, where they sort of eat everything that's in their cabinets that is going to be something that they are going to abstain from during Lent. So a lot of times they'll eat the rest of the things in their pantry so that they can sort of purge their house of the elements they aren't going to partake in during Lent. And Lent then is a 40-plus day season where the church gets a bit somber. We start to think about the fact that we're moving towards the death of Jesus, and so we think about Jesus' life and Jesus' suffering. Often during the period of Lent, people will give up something. Maybe some people will give up meat. Catholics tend to give up meat on Fridays. Some people will fast from all food on certain days. Some people will give up things that are distracting to them, maybe Facebook or Netflix, things that will allow them to focus on Jesus during that time and maybe pray more, read scripture more, and not be distracted by the things of life that tend to keep us from our reflection of Christ. So we are about to end this video, and we'll come back and finish talking about the major days in the Christian calendar, and then conclude this lecture soon.